Hello and welcome to another Battle Ready Minis painting tutorial. Today we're going to be painting some British Peninsular Infantry centre companies from Victrix Miniatures. These are really great, nice detailed miniatures. They're a little bit older, these casts I think, so there's a little bit of flash and stuff on them still, but overall really decent. So we start with a black undercoat for this one, and then we're going to use gory red from Vallejo for our red colour. This is obviously just going to be for the jackets, so slap that on all over the red coat. I try my best to avoid any of the webbing and stuff that later I'm going to be painting white, but it's not the end of the world if you get some on there, because obviously you can just layer over it afterwards. No harm done, really. Painting over black, a bit different. Most of my tutorials I use lots of contrast paint. I tend to paint over a white background, or a white undercoat I should say, but with the red over black you just need to make sure you do a couple of coats. So I've thinned this down. I'm doing one initial coat here. You can see the black sort of shows through a little bit, and then I've gone back and I've done another coat after it's dried to really get the colour popping. For the trousers, I've started with Stegodon Scale Green from Citadel. Now this is a very sort of dark bluey greeny grey colour. In terms of historical accuracy, it might be a little bit too blue, but I think it's nice. I think it's a nice colour. Stands out. I don't like the look of the really sort of light grey. I am going to work this up to a lighter grey eventually, but using the sort of dark greeny grey undercoat, I don't know, I feel it gives it a little bit more colour and a little bit more contrast with the red. So this is just for the trousers. However, the kind of circular, I think it's a canteen, I'm not 100% sure, but the strap thing on their belt, that's kind of this bluey grey colour as well. So do the trousers and then that canteen. Now taking a lighter grey, I'm using Dawnstone again from Citadel, and I'm just going to mix that in with the base colour, the Stegodon Scale Green, and just do a bit of layering and a bit of highlighting. I do a couple of layers of this, kind of building up the grey, and eventually just doing pure Dawnstone kind of highlights on it. Again, to try and, the trousers are supposed to be sort of a light grey, but I leave that kind of base colour showing a little bit to give it a bit more kind of character, really. I'm also going to use this to do the bedroll at the top of the pack. I think you could do the blankets in various different colours, kind of maintaining accuracy, but this is just easier from a painting standpoint. I'm then going to use a sort of off-white colour. I've got this camo beige, again from Vallejo, and I'm going to use this for all the areas that will eventually be white. So all the webbing. This is probably the trickiest bit because you have to be quite careful with the straps. But again, this is quite a light colour, so if you get some on the red, it's pretty easy to go back and fix it. I always start with a kind of off-white beigey colour when I'm going up to white. Firstly, just because the coverage is better. Painting white straight over colour, you're going to need to do loads of coats, and it just kind of saves time doing it this way. Also, I kind of think, it looks a bit more realistic. No one's got pure white kind of cloth uniform. I mean, that doesn't last very long when you're out and about walking around, especially in the dusty peninsula of Spain and Portugal. So yeah, two reasons really I prefer to use this. And again, just all the straps, all the webbing, and being as careful as possible. Also do the lines down on the backpack, the straps on the bedroll, and also the rifle strap as well with this colour, because those are all eventually going to be white. I'm also going to do the kind of plume in the helmet, on the helmet rather. The top of half of that's going to be white and the bottom half is going to be red, and also just the tips of the facing on the collar. I've got a very dark grey here. I've used Corvus Black from Citadel, and I'm just doing a little bit of edge highlighting on the black areas. It's a bit of a cheat really using the black undercoat, but again, if you're painting up lots of these figures, it's going to look fine. So I just use a dark grey, just go around the edge of the the shako along the brim, and then a little bit on the shoes as well. Here I'm just doing the rifle because I forgot. I'm going to use olive green for the kind of regimental colours here. So I haven't made a video about this in the past actually, but the facings, so the collars and the sleeves are going to be the regimental colour with these British troops. Lots of them were green, some of them were blue, some of them were kind of yellow or a buff colour. I've chosen to use green. I'm not particularly trying to represent any regiment, but I can kind of like retrofit it. I think the green looks nice and I wanted to do green, so I'll find a regiment that was in the Peninsular War that used green, and then I'll just say it's that regiment. I've got Doombull Brown here from Citadel. This is a good sort of reddy brown. I like to use this for wood and also leather. It's quite a good all-purpose kind of paint to have. So that's what I'm doing with this here. There's a little sort of ammo pouch which I've painted in this colour, and I'm also doing the wood of the rifle. Sorry, not rifle, musket in this colour as well, as you can see here. I'm moving on to the skin now, and I'm using saddled brown from Vallejo as a kind of base colour. It's kind of a dark, fleshy brown. It's really similar to Bugman's Glow from Citadel, which is what I always used to use. But that ran out, and I had some saddle brown from one of my camouflage paint sets that I bought recently. So I just used that instead, and it worked perfectly well. So moving on to the metallics now, I've got Retributor armor for the gold brassy bits and lead belcher for the silvery bits. So yeah, just apply those to obvious parts. The silver is going to be on the bayonet and the kind of barrel and the trigger and so on the gun, and then I just use the gold to do the little ornamentation on the shako. I don't think I used it for anything else. I'm now using a slightly lighter flesh colour, which is just skin tone from Vallejo, mixed in with the original base colour, saddle brown, and I'm just doing some highlights on the flesh, and I kind of gradually increase the amount of the skin tone paint just to lighten it up. So that's all the base layers down, and I'm going to do a wash now of Nuln oil. So one of the tips I've recently picked up, which I've put in the last couple of videos, is to just really water this down. I always used to put on this wash really thick, and it would really darken and kind of clog up the model, and I'd have to do lots of work then relayering with the base tones and highlighting. But if you just water down the wash a lot, you don't need to do that, right? It works just as well. You get the kind of recessed shading and you bring down the kind of saturation a little bit, but it doesn't clog it up and darken it up too much, and you don't have to do that much work afterwards. So after this kind of thin, watered down ink wash that I'm doing now, I kind of only really do a few highlights, and it really speeds up the process. So if there's one tip you take away from this, if you don't already do it, I would say thin down your ink washes. So here he is with the dried ink wash, and you can see that it's actually probably battle ready, to be honest. I'm going to add a few more highlights. So here I am with the base red colour, and I mixed a little bit of a brighter red. I used Evil Sun Scarlet, again from Citadel, just to do a few highlights. Again, I don't worry too much about the back of the jacket or the bits you can't see really easily. I basically just do the arms. And then for my white, I'm using Screaming Skull, which isn't a pure white. It's still a kind of an off-white. And again, just picking out the edges of the straps. I paint most of the straps with this really, but I just leave the kind of recesses in that beige colour. And then with the ink wash as well, I think it creates a nice kind of grimy look. The little kind of decorations on the sleeves need to be picked out in this as well. That's a little bit more painstaking, as with the straps on the backpack, as you can see here. But as long as you're careful, you can always fix up your mistakes afterwards. And here I am doing just the sleeves that I was talking about. Again, just go slowly, carefully. I decided to paint his sideburns and his hair with this light colour as well, because I wanted to use this sort of blondie coloured contrast paint to do his hair. So I wanted to just put a white undercoat under to make that easier, which it worked pretty well in the end, I think. And here what I did was an even lighter highlight on the skin, which it turned out was a bit of a mistake. I ended up using dark oath flesh contrast paint, as you can see here, to go over that, and there it looks, I think, a lot better. And then that's that blonde colour, that Nasdreg yellow, which was the contrast paint I used for the hair. And then I was pretty happy with the skin in the end. I kind of messed it up a bit by highlighting it too much, but then bringing it back down with the flesh coloured contrast paint. I was actually pretty happy with the finished result. Now this whole part is really optional, depending on what you're using the miniatures for. I wanted to mount this guy on a 25mm circular base. I don't really like the kind of pre-molded square bases, and you could just stick that square base on top of the round base, but then they kind of like raise up a little bit. They look like they're standing on a little kind of platform. So I've just carefully sort of clipped around his feet, and then I used my little file just to file down the bits that were actually underneath his feet, and he ended up sticking really nicely to this base. I've got some movement trays for 25mm bases that are round, and I like to have the option of either having the models in line or having them in skirmish formation. I plan on playing some sharp practice or some other sort of smaller scale Napoleonic games with these guys, and also maybe using them for proxies in some Warhammer 40k guard armies that I'm working on at the moment. I know you can use them on the square bases in skirmish, but personally I just don't think it looks that nice. I like the round bases, so again, this is up to you. This is all just personal preference. So the way I based him is very similar to the way I've based things in previous videos. You could go and check those out if you want to maybe a more in-depth look at it. I used some texture paint from Games Workshop just to lay down the initial kind of base. I then had some earth texture from Vallejo, which is what you can see now, the sort of peanut butter looking stuff. And that works pretty well. I'll layer some of that on top of that to just create a bit more variance. It's Agrellan Earth is the technical paint from GW that I use that kind of cracks, and I quite like that. So I had a kind of mix of this, and then on top of that I just used static grass and then a bit of pigment, which I make sure that I dust over onto the kind of legs and lower parts of the miniature as well, to give a kind of more complete look. So my phone died while I was filming all that. So here's the finished model. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it interesting and useful if you are painting something similar. I really enjoyed painting this miniature. The Victrix minis are really nice. I really enjoyed the Napoleonic uniforms as well. So like the video, subscribe if you found this useful, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much.